This year, for our 9th report, we collected information from 276 organizations employing over 10 million people. We surveyed more than 27,000 employees, conducted interviews with people of diverse identities, including women of color, LGBTQ+ women, and women with disabilities. Each year, we start the report by looking at the corporate pipeline because it offers a bird's eye view of the state of women in corporate America. And this year, the story is both frustrating as well as encouraging. Over the past 9 years, women remain underrepresented across the corporate pipeline, although there is a growing bright spot in senior leadership. Since 2015, the number of women in the C-suite has increased from 17% to 28%, and the representation of women at the VP and SVP levels has also improved significantly. But despite this bright spot, it's important to note that progress continues to be slower for women of color, who represent just 1 in 16 C-suite leaders. We're going to spend a lot of time with our panel today unpacking our research, but we know the data and the right policies alone aren't enough to drive the change we all want and need in the workplace. Engaging employees as change agents to evolve the culture of work and providing the right support structures for employees to learn and thrive is also critical. And so that's why at Lean In, we also invest time to build DE&I programs for companies to address some of the biggest challenges for women that we see in our research. So our Allyship at Work program helps employees at all levels recognize their privilege and power to create change and gives them concrete steps that they can help to take to practice allyship. While our 50 Ways to Fight Bias program teaches employees to identify and challenge bias against women in their workplace using very specific examples on the ways that bias shows up in common workplace interactions and giving them the practical tools to do something about it. Finally, our Circle for Companies program combines a world-class leadership curriculum with the power of small peer groups of women coming together to learn new skills and support one another. Circles are a highly scalable way to provide leadership training and peer mentorship to women. And as we go through the conversation today, I know that our panelists will touch more on the ways that they see value in utilizing these programs and hopefully provide inspiration for others too. So without further ado, let's get into it. All right, so we've structured the 9th annual Women in the Workplace study around 4 big myths holding women back at work today. We're going to walk through each of the myths together, and then we want to get some real-time reactions from the audience on what you think the reality is. So please scan the QR code, and it'll take you to a Mentimeter page, and we'll show you the myth, and then ask you to guess what the true reality is from a variety of responses. For anyone who doesn't have their phone, you can also access the survey by going to menti.com, MENTI.com, and entering the following code, 5268-2563. That's 5268-2563. And I will give folks a few minutes to find the code. All right. So here is the first myth that we are going to discuss. So the myth is the biggest barrier to women's advancement is the glass ceiling. And now you should see a few realities in the Mentimeter for a few options for the reality. The biggest barrier to women's advancement is underrepresentation. The biggest barrier to women's advancement is a lack of manager support. The biggest barrier to women's advancement is the broken rung, or is the biggest barrier to advancement is limited access to sponsors. I was going to ask our panelists what they think, but they know the answer, so that would be a total spoiler alert. So, all right. All right, so this is interesting. We're seeing that the first choice in the Mentimeter poll is that the biggest barrier to women's advancement is underrepresentation. That is certainly part of it, but in fact, the broken rung is the greatest obstacle women face on the path to senior leadership, and I'll unpack a little bit about that before we get to our amazing panel. So For the 9th consecutive year, women face their biggest hurdle at the first critical step up to manager. And this obstacle is greatest for women of color. For every 100 men promoted to manager, just 87 women and 73 women of color are promoted. And for Black women, that number is just 54. That's down to 2018 levels after making some gains in 2020 and 2021. So this means that 60% of managers are men compared to only 40% of women, and women may never catch up at this rate. So we're going to talk to our panel about the broken rung, but here are 3 things companies should know about the broken rung. Number 1, women are not responsible for it. Women at the entry and manager levels ask for promotions as often as men do, and they are no more likely to leave their company. Bias is a strong driver of the broken rung. Women are often hired and promoted based on past accomplishments, while men are hired and promoted based on future potential. And until the broken rung is fixed, gender parity in senior leadership remains out of reach. While companies are increasing women's representation at the top, doing so without addressing the broken rung offers only a temporary stopgap. Okay, that is enough from me. Turning it over to our panel. India, I'm going to start with you. At Lumen, a lot of your senior leadership is women, but you still see signs of a broken rung within your organization. Talk to us a little bit about the policies and structures you've put in place to help combat it.
Yeah, so that's a really great question. I appreciate that. While we are making great progress, I mean, you're right, we're not done yet. And so one of the things that we do is recognize right away that for women to ascend into leadership, we've got to make sure we're providing opportunities and then providing women with what they need to be successful. I mean, it's the very definition, quite frankly, of equity. And so one of the things that we do is we actually use data as our guide. So let's be clear first off on where we are in terms of representation and how that compares to availability of talent in the market. But then let's also collect maybe some of that qualitative information. So we do various listening initiatives. It might be focus groups, that might be listening circles, that might be various surveys. I would say our Women Empowered Employee Resource Group, quick shout out to we there, is certainly a partner really in this journey in terms of listening to their membership and understanding what it is that people need and are asking for in order to aid in their success. And then after that, taking action. So it's not enough to ask people for feedback and then do nothing with it, right? And so we take actions based off of those identified needs. And then we're also very careful to make sure that we're checking progress. Are we achieving those outcomes? Some of the different initiatives include things like, what are we doing to evolve our talent processes? And so when I think about that from a hiring perspective, that might include things like, using non-biased assessments or diverse interview panels, structured interview guides, but also about how do we ensure that as people are here, so beyond the hiring piece, what are we doing to make sure that we're developing them? So even equipping our leaders to lead inclusively by setting expectations around the development of all of their team members. You mentioned about bias, and there can certainly be that bias that exists where maybe only some team members get that development. We want to make it clear to our leaders that it's important for you to develop all of your team. So those are just some examples of things that we're doing to address that broken rung.
I love this notion that in order to make sure that women can advance, you got to make sure the opportunities are there and then putting the structures in place to do so. Thanks, India. All right, so Tamina, what are you hearing from women in LinkedIn's ERG group about the biggest challenges they're facing as you think about particularly early career women in terms of advancing?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, LinkedIn is luckily doing a pretty good job at promoting women into leadership positions. In our global business organization, we have actually reached gender parity across all director plus level roles globally, which is a major accomplishment. That being said, I do mentor and coach a lot of early career female professionals, both at my company and at other organizations as well. And a topic that frequently comes up is personal branding. And by that, I don't mean becoming an influencer. I mean strategic self-promotion of yourself and your work to unlock professional opportunities. Self-promotion is something that I see a lot of women, especially younger women, struggle with in general because of that double bind that they face. And, it looks like this. Like if you don't self-promote, people interpret that as a lack of interest in being a leader. But then on the flip side, if you do self-promote, as a woman, you oftentimes become less likable. And let's be real, we do live in a society that ostracizes people who are confident. I mean, just look at the media that treats women who are visibly successful like trash sometimes, right? And I would say in general, men, especially white straight men, are often promoted based on their potential, whereas women usually have to show their receipts. And for me personally, building a strong personal brand has been the biggest accelerator in my own career. And as I always like to say, and this is something I learned in Google's I'm Remarkable training many years ago, it's not bragging if it's based on facts.
I'm writing that one down. It's not bragging if it's based on facts. I hope that the audience is writing that one down as well. All right. Tiffany, I wanted to go over to you. Yesterday when we spoke, you shared that one of the largest populations are, multicultural women who are looking for those promotions from junior to mid-level roles. How are you thinking about supporting them? And what are you seeing in terms of trends at SMG?
Yeah, I think my fellow panelists have all hit the mark on various initiatives that really across the board, if you adopt, you are in a space of excellence. I think for us, certainly accountability and measurement. Part of our D&I framework, which is MILES, which was created in December of 2020, which stands for Mobility, Impact, Leadership, Equity, and Safety, were the pillars that I saw across the board in my career from job to job that were the ones that really captured the support for DE&I in any space. And so mobility specifically and equity, the M and the E, among the other pillars as well, are really the parts of the framework that we use to support multicultural women within SMG. Our professional development is tailored. We have programs like S&P Women's Leadership, which is on the publishing side. That is, I think, in its 4th cohort, which is very tailored to the experiences of senior leader women and very diverse. Because I think often what I've seen in my career, and it is important to tailor to specific groups as Circles does. But sometimes the greatest learning is when you have a diverse cohort, you're learning from each other. These are individuals that you're going to be rising with and honestly rising for. If you have a cohort, you're excited to go to work. And so we have a lot of tailored leadership development in the various business units within SMG. I honestly think leadership commitment, I can't say that enough, particularly in the environment that we're in which some leaders are not making that commitment. That is something that is not an issue for us at SMG in terms of our leadership commitment. But I also think, just for me, when you talked about, the personal brand, I developed my personal brand my junior year of college because I wanted to get into advertising. And I thought that's the way to get into advertising. And that's followed me my whole career. And it was simply just telling people, when you say my name, make sure you say my middle initial. So a brand doesn't have to be this really big thing. It could be something that's specific to you, which is every generation of women in my family use their middle initial, and it's a big deal. And so I think when you hear brand, sometimes it can be overwhelming, but it could be something as simple that is true to you and authentic to how you show up in the world that can make the biggest difference in terms of how you're seen in any environment.
Tiffany, I wish I had you in my back pocket earlier. One of my middle initials is an X, and I missed the boat. I totally missed the boat.
You didn't. You can add it in right now.
I love that. Tiffany, I want to go back to something that you said about, tailored leadership programs. For those who are in the audience who might want a couple of examples of what that could look like at their companies, can you share a little bit more?
Yeah, it could be something that includes resources like Lean In, or you could use outside resources, but it's only tailored if you listen to what the needs are of the particular cohort that you're trying to serve. When I came in, and we still work with, but we worked with this group called LEAP, and it really was about giving an opportunity for people across multiple companies at certain levels to learn from each other, but also to read the works of leaders from the past and learn from them. And it really worked for this environment. It's a creative environment. Music is creative. And so I had to think of something that wasn't standard. So it's looking at, okay, what industry are you in? And then what is the culture of your company? But then also, what are the needs for the group that you're working on as it relates to leadership development? And then also, what's the pain point? Maybe you've seen in your company that there hasn't been a lot of movement from manager to director. So tailor it for that specific pain point. Or you've seen, senior leader, women who are in senior leadership, not giving themselves space to do leadership development. I'm a lifelong learner. And I think as you move up, sometimes there was this article about covering. You're afraid to admit that you need professional development. So, again, it's looking at where the needs are and then tailoring the program for those needs.
Perfect. We are going to move into our second myth now. So I'm going to share my screen. Hot topic in corporate America today, flexible work. Okay, so the myth is it's mostly women who want and benefit from flexible work. And if you're just joining us, we want to hear from you what you think the actual reality is. So if you scan that QR code, or if you go to menti.com and put in that code there at the bottom, you'll be able to vote and we'll see what the audience thinks the reality is. So is it that it's mostly parents who want flexible work? Is it flexible work is hurting company performance overall? Is it men and women see flexibility as a top 3 employee benefit and critical to their company's success? Or is it men and women still view flexible work as a quote, nice to have benefit? Give folks a few minutes to answer. All right, I hear this is by a long shot. I'm smiling. Everyone got the correct reality, which is men and women see flexibility as a top 3 employee benefit and critical to their company's success. So that's where we are. That is the reality. And I'll unpack it now a little bit more. So a vast majority of employees, and it sounds like this is not to no surprise to our audience, say that opportunities to work remotely and have control over their schedules are top company benefits. Second only to healthcare. I'll let that sink in. Second only to healthcare. Folks are looking for flexibility. Workplace flexibility even ranks above tried and true benefits such as parental leave and childcare. There are also signs as we transition to a world where a majority of employees offer flexible working options that men continue to benefit from going into the office more than women. They're more likely to say they are in the know about decisions that impact their work. They are more likely to say they get the mentorship and sponsorship they need, and they're feeling more connected to their organization's mission and culture. I think it's also important to note that for company leaders that in-person work may not be delivering the anticipated connection to culture. Only 34% of women and 39% of men say a key benefit of going into the office is feeling more connected to organizational culture. Mason, I'm going to start with you this time because I know this is something that Mattel has thought a lot about. Mattel actually requires employees to come into the office more days than not. And, we have this data that shows that it's actually men who are benefiting more from on-site work. What is Mattel doing to ensure that the office is working for everyone?
Well, thank you for that. And I think there's a couple of things to that. One, yes, we are encouraged to come to work 4 days a week, but we're calling it within like in-person collaboration. I think what's important there is the fact that there still remains flexibility and the way to accommodate folks for their own specific situations. I would say that what we've seen, and Mattel, just to kind of give a foundation, our workforce is 57% women and 48% of our management jobs are held by women. So I think that what we do see is we see what I would call an equitable and equal amount of pushback towards wanting to come to work. And also what that does is also kind of galvanize also a community. And there's nothing wrong with that, I think, but what that has had to do is require us to understand flexibility, the needs of all, and understanding that part of leading inclusively means to think about, hey, we have what I would call like the initiatives to come back to work in person, but also we understand that what a day used to be defined for all of us, was like I'll come in at 8, I go to 6, like you kind of had this rote schedule. That is part of the idea of flexibility. A day is now a day, not a period of hours. So if I come in or anyone comes in on a Tuesday at 10 to 12 or 10 to 2, this is part of coming in, but also remaining flexible. So we're trying to make sure that is coming across. And, I think that's what's important, that we have top down and side to side alignment on that, but it does go down to the individual manager, the individual team, to make sure that they are actually living that word. And I think that that takes reminding, and also what are the benefits? You know, we're a toy company. So if you think about from a design and collaboration from a design and development piece, it helps to be together. If it helps, you know, and then for, let's call it more corporate functions, it helps to be together, but that also needs to be understood that if we're going to maximize everyone's ability, let's meet people where they are and have a dialogue as opposed to like an edict.
Mason, I appreciate you bringing up the importance of distilling this in individual managers. We see time and time again that the roles of individual managers, it doesn't really matter what's happening at the top if individual managers are not creating the culture where this balance of in-person work and flexible accommodation works for employees. So that's a great point. India, I'll go over to you. You've worked on at a structural level to roll out flexible work policies at Lumen. What are you seeing employees want from flexibility? How are you ensuring that these policies are also rolled out equitably?
Yeah, so the feedback that we've received, from our employees is that our flexible work policies really support the balance that they're looking for. It allows them to be their best selves, at work and at home. And then in terms of equitably rolling it out, I think, quite frankly, Mason probably said it best, is recognizing that flexibility is really the opposite of a one-size-fits-all approach, because one size just doesn't fit all, is the situation, right? And so instead, what we do is we allow our business units, for example, to determine the flexible work options that work best for their area. And then even deeper than that, right, there's also then that individual conversation, employee to their leader, around what's going to be appropriate or best for them as well. So it's really more about the option being there, is what people are saying is the right move. And I would say, as I think about even some of the feedback that we've gotten around, well-being, I think that ties into it. Even engagement, we continue to see those scores increase. And I have to believe that a piece of that is related to the flexible work options.
India, doubling down on that, so much, and Mason made me think of this, so much of flexible work is ensuring that culturally employees don't feel, what's called flexibility stigma, or this fear that if they opt into these policies, their career is going to be hurt as a result. Is there anything that's worked at Lumen to ensure that employees feel like not only is this a policy, but I can use it in practice?
Yeah, I think our CEO is a huge proponent, so kind of leading from the top is important. She will tell you all day long, that she believes in that flexibility, that is the way that we do things at Lumen. And so kind of starting there, let's all the way, down in the organization, deep in the organization, people realize that, yeah, we mean this, that we truly are wanting to offer that flexibility. We care about the whole person at Lumen, not just about what you can do between, what back in the day, the hours of 9 to 5, right? So not just those things, we care about that whole person and their full well-being, and offering that flexibility is a piece of it.
Fantastic. Tamina, anything to add there? What are you hearing from the Women's ERG at LinkedIn? Any global differences as we think about flexibility and what folks are looking for?
Yeah, I think Mason and India hit it spot on. And I certainly can't speak for everyone in my company, but something that I've personally observed and have come to truly appreciate is a general acknowledgement that family and personal well-being come first. I think India just hit the nail on the head by saying we look at the people holistically, not just as their professional identities, right? And so what this comes down to, like for me, for example, I rarely see people send emails after work hours, which is great. I've seen people of all genders take a break from work, for example, at 2:30 p.m. to pick up their kids from school. And employees who are affiliated with an office, while they are encouraged to go into the office like twice a week, but at least on my team, it is not very strictly enforced. And again, if you have to leave at 2 p.m. or 4 p.m. to be home at a reasonable time, that's perfectly fine. I do think this is very much dependent on the team and management, but that's very much my lived reality. And again, going back to what India shared, I think at the end of the day, it all comes down to culture and also leaders setting a positive example themselves.
And Tiffany, as you think about, SMG is also an employee base of creatives. I'm sure there is some, value to in-person work, but also thinking about how to offer flexibility. anything top of mind for you as you think about this new world order of flexible work?
Yeah, I mean, my whole career has been spent in the creative industries. And I think as not even a secret creative, I'm not outing myself as a creative, but I consider myself, people have named me a heart director versus an art director. And I love that. But I think we've secretly been praying for this flexibility. I remember flexibility used to be the domain for very senior people. You know, if someone got a Friday off or they got a 4-day work week, it was very much like, you know, looked at as a luxury. And I think, you know, the evolution pandemic obviously, you know, hastened it, but I also think tech issued in some flexibility conversations as well. You know, I think now people are getting to choose I loved what you said, Mason, about what a day looks like, and having the support to go and pick up your child, even if you're someone who practices self-care, taking that time to take a step back and take a step back in to work. And so, you know, flexibility, particularly when you're in a creative environment, is important. But also I want to speak to that idea that ideas come from in-person collaboration and communication. And so I think, I don't know if this has been researched, but I think it has had an impact on certain level of collaboration and creativity, where flexibility does mean that people are not necessarily in person all the time, and you lose some of what happens when you're just walking down the hall and bump into someone, or you're taking a coffee break and you strike up a conversation about something that's germane to your business. So I do think that's been impacted, but that in no way should stop the flexibility conversation and the evolution of what you know, a work day looks like in the workplace of today.
And our understanding from the data and interviews that we're doing is that this flexible conversation is far from over. I think we're going to continue to see it evolve. All right, oh yeah, Mason, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that, because I think what the word conversation is important, because I think what we've seen in a transition over the last few years, I think, and again, to Tiffany's point, the acceleration of this through the pandemic was that before, I feel like sometimes conversation was one direction. Here's what you're going to do. This is what it is. And then what I think we've seen the evolution is like, we need to have a conversation with employees, and that needs to be acknowledged. That doesn't mean that everyone gets what they want, but there is the right and the expectation to ask, to question, and without being stigmatized, because that's, you know, one of the things that we track through our global pulse surveys is my ability to challenge the status quo or ask, you know, questions that may be challenging. You know, before, I think there's an idea that, again, it's a unilateral conversation between employee and employer. And I think now that evolution is actually what helps retain people, and it actually wants them to the desire to continue to be developed. And that's in that attraction, especially when we see a workforce that is going through a generational shift now. There are expectations that are from, you know, let's call it, you know, Gen Z folks that are coming through. So like, here's what an expectation is. And again, now that's a conversation. It's not a, you know, just because I say I want something doesn't mean I get it, but I want to be able to have a conversation.
Love that, Mason. Thanks for adding that in. All right, we're going to move on to the third myth, which I know a lot of folks here feel passionately about. I do as well. All right, so the third myth is microaggressions have a micro impact. So go ahead and go back into your Mentimeter audience and check out the realities that we have for you in the poll. Is it that microaggressions aren't common for women at work? Is it microaggressions have a long and lasting impact on women? Microaggressions are just small slights for women at work, or microaggressions are only felt by women with traditionally marginalized identities? Everyone, a few minutes to vote. Few seconds, I should say. All right, again, we got a smart audience of folks here. Majority of people got this right. Microaggressions have a large and lasting impact on women. So let's break down what that means. So microaggressions, for those who are not aware, are demeaning or dismissive comments and actions directed at a person because of their gender, race, or other aspects of their identity. Women are twice as likely as men to be spoken over and mistaken for more junior women. These are common microaggressions. And women with traditionally marginalized identities experience more demeaning and othering microaggressions. Here are a few that just stand out for me. Asian women are 5 times more likely than white women and men to be mistaken for someone else of the same race and ethnicity. Black women are 3 times more likely than white women and men to have to code switch. Women with disabilities are far more likely to feel like they have to perform perfectly without being judged. And as microaggressions harm women and threaten their psychological safety, women engage in what we are calling self-shielding. So they're adjusting the way they look or act in an effort to protect themselves. So for example, women may choose not to speak up or share an opinion to avoid seeming difficult or aggressive to their colleagues. And the impact of this, of these microaggressions and having to constantly self-shield in the workplace is having an immense negative impact on women. So women who experience microaggressions and self-shield are 4.2 times more likely to feel burnt out, 3.3 times more likely to consider leaving their company, 2.6 times more likely to say that they wouldn't recommend their company, and 3.8 times more likely to feel they don't have an equal opportunity to advance. Those multiples are some of the highest that we have ever seen in the report when we think about it from a data perspective. So, Tiffany, I'll start this one with you. Microaggressions have impacted your career personally, and you've also focused a lot of Sony Music Group's DE&I work on educating employees about them, in part by leveraging our allyship at work and 50 Ways to Fight Bias program soon. What would you like to share about your own experiences? And also, how do you effectively communicate to employees just the massive impact that these microaggressions have?
Yes, I think for me personally, obviously I've come in contact with people who have been impacted by microaggressions because of my work, but certainly I didn't really understand the full impact of it because I have the tools to deal with it, but one kind of got through the sieve of that toolkit that I have to deal with it. And I can tell you that, I spent so many years creating this collage of confidence, and I could walk in any room knowing that I have a mastery of my discipline, I have a mastery of who I am as a person, my self-awareness, all the things. And then one dismissive comment sent me into a place where, I'm sitting there and I'm trying not to cry. My throat gets tight and it starts hurting because I'm stifling the cry. We've all been there. And, I was in a very senior room with very senior people, and a comment was made that sent me back. I mean, we all know reasons why you feel this way, to junior high and not being picked for something, and just sort of, it didn't erase all those years of this collage of confidence, but it set me back a little bit. But it did 2 things. I had a little bit of a setback, but it prepared me to have more of a comeback, in the sense that it created more empathy, so that when I coached or met with people, I was in the moment with them because it just happened. And what I learned in that moment is that microaggressions is very personal to the receiver. So people could be sitting on either side of me and not think that anything was said, and that what was said was very minor, but it's very personal to the person who receives it. And so, that's where allyship comes in and is very, very important. You can identify the biases that create microaggression, but unless you teach allies to spot those moments where someone may be reeling from an unintended comment. And, we all know that people have good intentions, and a lot of these comments are made not with ill will, but the impact is still real, even if the intention was not. So I think my advice is always, when someone says that they've had a microaggression, is to believe them the first time, much like we believe, women and men who have been impacted by assault. It does feel like an assault in a way. I can't think of a stronger word than that. And it does sometimes take a while to climb back. But again, what it did for me is it put me right in the seat of empathy again. And now I think I'm a stronger coach because I had that very recent moment of being confronted with a microaggression.
Intent as opposed to impact, impact as opposed to thinking about intent. It's the impact that matters. India, I saw you nodding during, Tiffany's entire response practically. You've rolled out Allyship at Work's, our Allyship at Work series, company-wide at Lumen, in part to combat this myth that microaggressions are just small slights. But you've also started to assess employees based on their abilities to show up as allies to their colleagues. Tell us a little bit more about that, because I think it's just amazing.
Sure, Caroline, I'm really excited to talk about it. And so you're right, we have rolled out allyship at work training. We're in the throes of that right now. But another thing that we have done is we have rolled out a behavior allyship. So let me back up a little bit. Because when we assess performance at Lumen, we assess on two axes, right? We look at the results that you achieve and how you got them. And that how is really the behaviors. And so that behavior, the one behavior that I'm calling out today is allyship, where it is now going to be a part of that performance management. And so in order to be able to assess that, we need to also make sure then that we're arming people with that knowledge. As you know, there will be many people who will say, hey, I'm an ally, but they don't actually know what that means, or they're not, taking the actions and not recognizing that it is more than just saying I'm an ally, that there are actions that you need to take to really show up as an ally. And so one of the things that we have done in addition to the allyship at work training is we have also provided employees by level with performance indicators. And so it's really a guide that they can use throughout the year. And then that also, when it's time to assess that performance in terms of allyship, that people who will be providing feedback or ratings can also look at. But it's really a guide to help people understand what truly does allyship look like. At this particular level, what would we be expecting of you in terms of meeting expectations as an ally? What does it look like to not meet those expectations? And then what might it look like to exceed in this space? And so I think, that along with the allyship at work training, we've also done 50 ways to fight bias, as well as providing resources, updated resources on a regular basis, are all part of the things that we are providing to employees in their toolkit to aid them as they're on this allyship journey.
Fantastic. I just love that. It's not just the results, but how you get the results and really assessing that on an individual employee level. Mason, when we spoke, this was, a myth that was, really important to you. Mattel has done a lot of work to ensure employees properly understand the impact of microaggressions. Just tell us a little bit, and then you shared a story with me in our call last week, if you wanted to share part of that with the audience as well.
Oh, I shared several stories, so I'm remiss to say which one that was, but I'll start here. I love the fact that what India said about the allyship as being part of the toolkit, and I think that one of the things when we talk about microaggressions, that is a subset of behaviors that we are standing against, and we instead of being, let's say, admonishing. We want to say that these are the behaviors that, if you're going to be an inclusive leader at Mattel, these are the things that you need to be on the lookout for. Now, and then that goes back to the way that we, equitably manage people within teams. And again, I think for one of the things that we say microaggressions, but to the fact that to Tiffany's point, like it's an aggression no matter what, and to not diminish it even for the person who's had that feeling. But then there's also the opportunity to grow. And our DEI team, sometimes we do work with teams in and around how to foster an inclusive culture. Now that, again, that's where we talk about these actions that have happened. And some of that has come because teams need help, but bringing a team together, and then saying, hey, you know what, this has happened. This is what we don't do this ever again. It's more about how do we develop what we want to be? How do you want to develop yourself as employees, the way that we treat each other, the way that we actually interact in order to be more collaborative, to be more innovative. The other piece is when I think about last year, we had a women's conference. So each year we have a women's conference. And last year it was, we had about 1,400 people through 450 or so in person, and then others who are, at viewing parties and whatnot. And one of the things that was great was the fact that there were so many men involved as well, learning and sitting back and participating, not just as, to sit and not interact, but to be a part and say, hey, this is something I've not thought about. And then when we think about microaggressions across the intersectionality, I can think of an example where we think about the experiences that Black women have compared to microaggressions that might be felt by others. It could be in and around hair, and it could be in and around, these things that I'm sure that folks know and have felt and will, unfortunately may feel again in our times. It's the idea that understanding that the microaggressions are unique to each person. right? There's no, because I would say if you're making a broad statement, then you're committing a macroaggression against an entirety of people's identity. So it's important for us to really acknowledge the behaviors that go into being an inclusive leader, that go into our, like what I call our values, right? And for those leaders, what are you doing as a leader to foster that inclusion and foster that environment? Because it goes back to the what and the how matter, equally, right? And so I think what we have to do is keep that at the forefront of our mind. And what do? That means communication, over and over again, and really reinforcement.
Absolutely. All right, we are coming to our fourth myth. So I'm going to pull that up right now to continue the conversation. Here's the myth. Women are becoming less ambitious. And if you wanted to vote in the poll, you can go ahead and scan that QR code now to guess what the reality could be. Is it that women were always less ambitious than men? Or is it working from home during the pandemic curbed women's ambitions permanently? Is it that women's ambitions are the same after the pandemic as before? Or is it that women are more ambitious than before the pandemic and flexibility is actually fueling that ambition? Another clear winner. Women are more ambitious than before the pandemic, and the data could not be clearer here. I'll walk you through that. And flexibility is fueling that ambition. So look at those bars, all of them even. Women are equally as ambitious as men at every stage of the corporate pipeline, from entry level to the C-suite. They are as committed to their careers and interested in being promoted. And young women are especially ambitious. So 9 in 10 women want to be promoted to the next level, and 3 and 4 aspire to become senior leaders. I think we've all seen, some coverage in the news about Gen Z, Z being less ambitious, but our data actually show a very different story. It's also important to note that women of color are even more ambitious than white women. 96% say that their career is important to them, and 88% want to be promoted to the next level. So I talked a little bit about the news, but there just has been a lot of articles indicating that flexibility is actually decreasing women's ambition, when in fact, we're seeing that it's fueling it. 1 in 5 women say flexible work options are helping them stay in their job or avoid reducing hours. A majority of women report having more time to get their work done when they work remotely. And there was a recent New York Times article that showed that American women working for pay is at a record high, and that this surge has been led. So the surge has been led by mothers of children under 5 who are now able to work remote jobs. So Tamina, I'll start this one with you. What I love about your story is that you brought Lean In Circles to LinkedIn when you were in a much more junior role. What led you to take on this initiative? And also, how have you seen women's ambitions grow at LinkedIn since the pandemic?
I love that question. Thank you, Caroline. So we, on the Women at LinkedIn side, started partnering with Lean In when we already had a very strong programming lineup in place. For context, we have a very big team globally. And because we were founded back in 2011, we have over 12 years of experience as an ERG. So as a result of that, we actually rarely need the support of external partners, but given just a very strong value alignment and how easily specifically the Women at Work collection could be implemented into our pre-existing circle type cohorts, we just recognized and fully appreciated the synergies that Lean In's program allowed us to create here. And then, in regards to women's ambition, and this holds true not only for my women colleagues, but for the many, many women in my network as a whole, I've personally witnessed women's ambition grow in a way that allows them to build lives that are in more alignment with their values and their priorities, both personally and professionally. And, that manifests itself in many different ways, either through an internal role or a complete career pivot, starting their own businesses, fulfilling their lifelong dream of writing a book, or even taking a more active approach to their personal finances. You know, Caroline, a lot of the work that I do centers around getting more money into the hands of women because money equals freedom. And as I always like to say, a wealthy woman can walk out of almost every room she feels uncomfortable in and create opportunities for other women along the way. And that's really all I want. I want all women to live life on their own terms, a life that is joyful and abundant, based on freedom, purpose, and self-expression.
Ambition is definitely a part of that. Tiffany, starting at a very young age, you told me that you've been described as ambitious. I think you told me since it was on some sort of report card when you were 2.5 or 3 even.
Yeah.
And you never thought that it was a bad thing, and why would you? But now culture has somehow gendered the word ambition, and it's made it negative when it comes to women. How did this happen? How do we change it?
Yeah, I want to put that in context. I was part of Head Start, which is a program that many people know of, and they give you progress reports. So besides the fact that, you know, I could pick a circle and a triangle, somehow ambition found its way into the progress report. And so it's always been in my mind for, you know, for a very long time until I came up against that engendered version of it, and the impact of it was a positive, because there was not, it wasn't couched in a negative. It was actually put in place in that progress report as a positive. And so, you know, my relationship with ambition has been one of positive intent. But, you know, I work with many young women, and I have an intergenerational board of advisors, so to speak, that goes all the way up to one member is 70 years old. And, you know, at various stages, you know, in a woman's career in life, ambition plays a role. And I think it fuels not only success and achievement, but also self-awareness, how you see yourself. And so you get these messages from society through media or advertising, in which ambition is made fun of, or it's an, you know, unintended part of a storyline. It's used as a way to facilitate moments. And so unfortunately, those messages have come really strong. But when you look at this generation, when you look at TikTok and other platforms that aim to reclaim these things that seem to be a blockade for many of us, Gen X, proud Gen Xer, it really gives me hope that they'll have the same relationship with the word that I did. And that was just by accident, because it was in a progress report. And, you know, my mom drilled down on that. She's like, ambition, this is a good thing. So I got really strong messages from the women in my family, including our matriarch, the one who started it all, Catherine, that ambition is a really, really good thing. I don't know, I think the engenderment happened because of how media portrays ambition. But I think as we get more women writers, and we get more women who are producing and creating content, and who are reclaiming and re-owning the word, I think we're on a better path in terms of, I guess, society's relationship with ambition.
Yes, yes, and yes. Thank you, Tiffany. Such great points. And India, we discussed earlier, you know, implementing flexible work policies at Lumen. I'd love to hear how you're seeing that, you know, fuel the ambitions of your women colleagues.
You know, I think the flexibility really allows the space, quite frankly, for women to pursue their ambitions. You know, I think about even a lot of what Tiffany just said, you know, this notion of ambition being a negative thing is if there were no ambition, I can only imagine what we wouldn't have today. You know, if you think about someone had ambition, and that's why we have a lot of the technology that we have today. That's why we have, you know, just a lot of the things that we might see as just kind of, you know, standard things, that really it took some ambition, quite frankly, for someone to take that step. And I think, you know, with women, recognizing one, the flexibility that might be necessary in order for them to pursue those ambitions is a real thing. And I would say that Lumen has just really leaned into that. You know, I mentioned earlier about caring about the whole person. That includes, like, what are you interested in outside of these doors, or even inside of these doors, and you're wanting to do something different, or you're wanting to grow your career, you're wanting to move vertically, whatever that might be. Having that flexibility certainly allows for the space for women to go after it.
Mason, anything to add there?
Yeah, I'm a firm believer in the idea that if you see it, you can be it. So it really takes the time to walk to like for companies to set up programs. So if I can speak to from Mattel side. We have a handler, Ruth Handler, our founder. We have a mentorship program for women within, and that's some folks are doing mentorship outside of Mattel and some from within. And we encourage senior leaders to join in, and that mentorship is really bi-directional. It's not I've been here for 10 years, I'm going to help you do this, do as I say. It's more about the continuous development of that relationship. Similarly, I wanted to touch on something else, but the word ambition, and I think some of the words that get like engendered coming out of that, the idea of, I sat in a room recently where somebody said, well, she's passionate, and then that was thought of as being something that was tied to this ambition, like as if that being passionate for what you believe in is somehow an emotionally driven piece, as opposed to like, these are my skills, I'm excited to do this. And actually having to pause somebody and saying like, why are we talking about this when we would not even talk about this for someone else? So that takes voices in the room. That goes back to the idea of allyship. That goes back to the idea of, I think all of the myths that we're talking about are interwoven. They're not like standalone things. There's these myths exist in conjunction. And so the idea that we acknowledge it, and we may not say these four myths exactly worded like this, but it's cognitively thinking, how do we develop people? Are there opportunities? And going back to that, if you see it, you can be it. Last year, we had a couple panels. We hosted a series called Empowering the Future. And so each week, whether it's hosted by ERG or by myself, we have executives come up and actually tell their stories. And we are like you. And having people say like, hey, I took a pause in my career because I wanted to focus on my family, and I came back and even more driven. And and now I'm the chief communications officer. I'm an SVP, and folks who are sitting in the audience, men and women alike, are like, hey, that's possible, and that's actually being celebrated. So like celebrating the stories of success and warning and heeding the warnings that, hey, if we're not treating people equitably, somebody needs to stand up and say something. If you see it, say it. And then that's also a way of correcting, learning, growing the culture continuously. And I think that's an important thing to do.
And Caroline, can I add one thing that I would be remiss not to add is the power of women creators and artists to sort of be the soundtrack for ambition. And so when I answer the question, I'm like, oh my gosh, we have so many creators here at Sony Music Group who literally would be on somebody's playlist for ambition. You think about Beyonce and Adele, Victoria Monet with her Ode to Her Mom. Like these are SMG creators who have literally played a huge part in some way of modeling ambition in a really beautiful way, but also providing the soundtrack. I think no one would say on this call that they don't have a playlist that pumps them up. So I had to sort of put a little plug in for some of our most ambitious creators that we have at SMG.
Yeah, not only do I have a playlist, but I've been one to get into a bathroom and do one of these, right before a hard meeting. Anyone else? Mason, thank you. Appreciate it. I cannot think of a better note to end on. This has been such a fantastic panel. I want to thank more than the 1,300 attendees who joined us. I also want to thank our fantastic panel. The journalist in me couldn't help it, but I took pages of notes. I just want to highlight a few of the top things that I heard from the panel today. Tamina talked about the importance of personal branding. It's not bragging if it's true. I make that on a tattoo. Mason, you talked about ensuring individual managers are championing flexible work policies so employees feel that they are equitable and they're rolled out equitably. India, I love this idea of considering assessing employees, not just on the results, but how they get there. And Tiffany, ambition is positive. We need to reclaim that reality, particularly when it comes to women. Microaggressions, they feel like assaults and need to be treated as so within companies. So thank you for all those insights and more. And if you want to check out the full Women in the Workplace report or learn more about the programs that are available to you free of charge, here is where you can do that. Thank you again. Happy International Women's Day. And here's to us all committing to inspiring inclusion together. Thank you.